like to ask you some questions. How did you decide to become an orchardist?
I grew up on an orchard, so my whole life I was working with my dad and my grandpa in the orchard. So it's something I really enjoyed. Love being outside, like growing things.
Can you please explain to us your current method of operating your orchard?
Current method. Ooh, that's a tough question. So I kind of have two jobs. I manage about 2,500 acres of orchard, and then I also have an orchard of my own. So my own orchard and most all the orchard that I manage is all farmed conventionally. You guys know what that means?
No. Can you please explain to us what that means?
So conventional farming is using synthetic pesticides, synthetic fertilizers. It's not organic. Yeah, it's not organic. So all the orchards that operate are all managed conventionally or with synthetic pesticides and fertilizers.
How does the weather affect the fertilizer you're using?
That's a good question. The weather, obviously, most all the fertilizers that I use are dry fertilizers, so they need water to incorporate them into the soil. So usually I can do that with irrigation. I have irrigation everywhere. But if there's going to be too much water, so if we're going to get a lot of rain, I don't want to put on my fertilizers. I wait because it will either wash it right through the soil or wash it away. So I got to be careful. Also, I know if it's going to be really hot, there are certain fertilizers that if I don't put them on and then water them in right away, they'll actually volatilize. They'll turn into a gas and disappear before they can get into the soil, and then it doesn't do me any good.
Has your current method changed from years past?
Yes, my current method has changed, and it's changed because of things that I've learned. So, as in anything, you find out what works and what doesn't work. So hopefully you're smart enough to avoid what doesn't work and you don't keep doing that, and you move on to the things that work better, right? You find something that doesn't work, you toss it aside, and you try something else. So my methods have changed mostly because of the things that I've learned and mistakes I've made.
If you were to recommend a fertilizer, which one would you recommend and why?
That's a good question. If I were, it would all depend on what crop, right? Mostly around here we grow apples. So it all depends on what the tree needs. So it would really depend on the type of apple, the crop load, the soil type, and just the demands of the tree. So one of my favorite fertilizers that I like just for general use is called 1616. It's 16% nitrogen, 16% potassium, and 16% phosphorus. Okay? And I like it because it's really well balanced and it's slow release. That means all the nutrients don't release all at once into the soil, but it takes time. So it kind of spoon feeds the plant. So if you're going to take a drink, you don't want to dump a bucket of water over your head, right?
Yeah.
If you're on fire, you want to dump a bucket of water over your head. But if you want to drink, you just take sips, right? So 1616 is kind of like giving sips to the plant. It just feeds it a little bit over time.
In the years that you've been an orchardist, what fertilizer was the best and which was the worst?
Good question. The fertilizer that I like that is one of the best fertilizers is calcium nitrate. It's very cheap, which is good. It's always good when you're trying to make money growing fruit. So it's cheap, and it's effective. I use it mostly when I want nitrogen, but it also puts some calcium into the soil, which is super important for the plants. But I like it because it's cheap and it's effective. One of the fertilizers that I like the least is a fertilizer. We just call it 1152. It's the analysis is 01152. Are you guys familiar with the analysis of fertilizers?
No.
NPK. That's what nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Okay, that's what the NPK stands for. So it's 01152. 0 nitrogen, 11 potassium, 52% potassium, phosphorus, then potassium. And I don't like it very much because it's just not very available. So it's hard for it to get from the soil and then into the plant.
How do you apply a fertilizer?
Most of the fertilizers I apply them dry, broadcast over the whole orchard floor. So you drive through the orchard with a mechanical spreader, and it just goes along and it meters out the fertilizer, so it doesn't just dump it all in a pile, but it spreads it out nicely over the orchard. That's mostly what I do. But I also use fertigation or drip irrigation. So I'll get a big tank of liquid fertilizer that will slowly drip into a system that puts it out right at the tree, right at the root zone.
If you were to change one thing about the fertilizer you're using, what would you change?
What would I change about the fertilizer I use? Well, if I could, if I had the money, I would use a lot more organic fertilizers because they're super effective, but you have to put on a lot of it. You have to put on a lot of it, and it's expensive, super expensive. But it's the best for the soil. It gives you the best soil health. And soil needs to be healthy just like you and I need to be healthy. You know, eat your vitamins and exercise. And if you just use just synthetic fertilizers, it kind of makes the soil kind of weak. But organic fertilizers help build the soil up so it can almost take care of itself. So if I had the money mostly money, it's super expensive, I would use more organic fertilizers.
What are the pros and cons of the fertilizer you're currently using?
Pros of the fertilizer or the types of fertilizer I currently use. The pros are they're cheaper. They're cheaper, and there's a lot of available nutrients. Okay? A lot of available nutrients. Those are the pros. The cons are they're synthetic, right? They're synthetic. So, do you guys know how fertilizer is produced?
Mm-hmm.
They use oil. Okay, most synthetic fertilizers are produced using oil. So, it's not the most sustainable way, right? It helps produce a lot of food, but it's not the most sustainable. So, that's probably the cons are. It's fake, right? It doesn't build up the soil as well. You can produce a lot of food and produce good crops, but it's kind of hard on the whole system.
Any more questions, guys?
Would you pass down your orchard to your future generations?
I would love to. I'd love it if my kids wanted to come back and farm. Obviously, any parent wants to have their kids close to them. But I have 8 kids, so there's not enough for all of them. So they'll have to draw straws. We'll see. But yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I love the lifestyle. I love being outside. I love growing things. And I would hope that my kids, at least some of them, would enjoy that too.
All right.
Well, that concludes our questions. Thank you for your time.
You bet.